Queenslanders are spending more time stuck behind the wheel of their car than ever before, and without a plan, things are going to continue to deteriorate. Today, the opposition can reveal new figures that show each day 40 hours are lost for motorists at level crossings across Brisbane. And that's just Monday to Friday, and that's just in the morning. So that's 200 hours per week. That's over 10,000 hours per year of motorists stuck behind their car because of a government that has been unable to plan. Queensland desperately needs a generational infrastructure plan. Queenslanders desperately need to know that their time is valuable and the government has a plan to deliver something for them. At the moment in Queensland, all that the state government seems to have is tunnel vision. There isn't an infrastructure plan to ensure that motorists don't continue to spend hours behind the wheel of their car. And 40 hours every day, just in the morning, shows how dire the problem has got. If you look across other states, governments have had a plan to remove open level crossings. Since 2015, Victoria has removed 72 level crossings. Queensland hasn't removed one. Not a single level crossing has been removed in this state because of a government without an infrastructure plan to get people stuck from behind their steering wheels. Queenslanders need more than tunnel vision. They need an infrastructure plan to ensure that motorists don't spend 40 hours every morning of every weekday stuck behind the wheel of their car. And finally, I make this point. With a growing region comes a growing demand for services and for infrastructure. And Queenslanders are seeing frontline services crumble before their eyes. They're seeing the failure of the government to deliver an infrastructure plan, and it is costing them time and it is costing them business opportunities. These delays means a mum stuck behind the wheel of her car. It means a father unable to take their kids to soccer training. It's a business owner who can't connect with services to employ people for generations to come. And Queenslanders need a generational infrastructure plan, and we commit to giving one to this state. Christian's here to talk about some educational things as well. Christian.
Well, thanks very much, David. Dr. Christian Rowan, and I'm the LNP's Shadow Minister for Education. Well, I'm here to provide an update on the Palaszczuk Labor government in relation to education following estimates, a report card. Now, at the last election, the Palaszczuk Labor government said that they would recruit 6,190 new teachers and 1,139 new teacher aides. And what we've found on the latest Queensland public sector workforce profile is that they've only recruited 587 teachers and teacher aides. They are failing when it comes to teacher recruitment here in Queensland. Then when we look at educational outcomes, not a single target has been met across years 3, 5, 7 and 9 when it comes to reading, writing and mathematics. And that's a disgrace when it comes to our educational outcomes here in Queensland not being met, and they're even worse in Indigenous communities. When it comes to declining school attendance rates, we're also seeing those grow here in Queensland. And if students aren't learning, they're not getting the required skills that they need in reading and writing and mathematics to then be able to go into our workforce and provide themselves with the skills that they need and the jobs into the future. We're also seeing delays in school projects. Schools in Park Ridge and Collingwood Park were supposed to be delivered in 2024 and now won't come online till 2025. There is also a broken schools behavioural management framework here in Queensland. Teachers are contacting the opposition all of the time in relation to decisions being taken in schools, then being overridden by the department, and then in some cases industrial action then being threatened. We also have the growing issue of substance misuse in our schools, and whether that be vaping, smoking or other substances. And you can't fix what you don't measure properly. Exclusions and suspensions under this government in relation to substance misuse are up 190% since the government was elected in 2015. And there are also serious questions for the government to answer in relation to both lobbying and the use of consultants. So the Labor government has a broken promise when it comes to teacher numbers in our schools. They're failing on educational outcomes. They're not delivering the infrastructure that's needed on time. They're failing on education, and they're also losing control of safety in our schools.
In terms of the teacher numbers, could could that be put down partially to lack of incentives for teachers being burnt out, class sizes being too large?
Well, since this government's been elected, it's never had a comprehensive plan in relation to recruitment and retention for teachers here in Queensland. And what we're seeing is teachers leaving the profession, and we're also seeing a failure by this government to meet its election commitment. It has a failed election commitment when it comes to recruiting new teachers and teacher aides here in Queensland. And as a result, schools aren't getting the teachers that they need to be able to give students the best educational opportunities in literacy and numeracy to then be able to go on to tertiary education, to other courses, and to be productive members of our economy. The government must do more. It needs a comprehensive teacher workforce plan, but importantly, they have failed to deliver on what they promised the people of Queensland at the last election when it comes to new teachers and teacher aides.
Is the 500 new teachers, do we know stats to put that in perspective about attrition?
Well, the 587 is what the Queensland public sector workforce has indicated has been recruited in relation to new teachers and teacher aides. But the government, as was revealed at estimates in relation to new teachers and new teacher aides, is failing to meet its targets of 6,190 new teachers and over 1,100 new teacher aides. They're well and truly off the mark when it comes to recruiting those teachers, and as a consequence, our students are suffering and not achieving the educational outcomes that they should be achieving here in Queensland.
Can I just ask David about culture?
Yeah.
So we've heard from the health minister this morning that they're close to working out the terms of reference for that broader culture hospital review into the emergency department into paediatric care. Do you have any suggestions on what those terms of reference should include?
Well, that review is now overdue, and I just imagine what that's like for someone who has fallen through the cracks of that system. I wonder what that's like for the staff working at the front line, burnt out, feeling battered and broken and bruised. And every time a government promises something and then misses a deadline, that just undermines confidence in the system. So we want to see that review delivered. We want it to be transparent. We want patients to be put first. We want staff to be respected and valued. And we want a government to meet its promises. Now, I don't think that's too much to ask. And when the government is unable to even meet its timelines, when it's unable to be open and transparent, when you've got patients feeling like they're left in the dark and staff being treated like punching bags, no one wins. And frontline service delivery is crumbling before the eyes of Queenslanders. And when governments don't keep their promises, that's when people fall through the cracks, that's when staff leave in droves, and that's when people lose faith in the government to do what they say they're going to do.
Okay, and these things that obviously they're quite complicated, but they're taking too long as far as you see it?
Well, a promise was made, and that review is overdue. And that leaves staff feeling anxious, it leaves patients feeling undervalued, and it leaves Queenslanders doubting whether the government is serious about healing the Queensland health crisis.
In terms of the level crossings, how costly and lengthy would a process similar to Victoria's be?
Well, you've got to make a start. And we're now approaching our third election cycle where the government said it was going to do something about Beams Road, for example. Now that project has gone from 120 million to around 200 million, and our internal people from the department say that figure will blow out further. Most troubling is the government said that there'd be shovels in the ground in 2021, and still Queenslanders wait and watch. Now, no one expects infrastructure to be delivered overnight, but they do want to see a plan. And when you look across the border and you see 72 level crossings eliminated in Victoria, and the state government in Queensland haven't even been able to do the one that they promised 3 election cycles ago, well, that leaves people feeling helpless and as though their time is invaluable. And there's a real impact. And the numbers that we've revealed today shows that. Just between Monday to Friday, in the morning commute, 40 hours every day, that's 200 hours every week, that's over 10,000 lost hours every year at open level crossings that should have been removed. And we're desperate to see an infrastructure plan. And the government should acknowledge that you can't just have a focus on one project. It needs to be an infrastructure strategy for all of Queensland and for all modes of transport for Queensland.
In terms of the Mark Bailey investigation, do you have concerns about what the government is saying is an independent investigation, but is being overlooked by the Director General? The Premier now says there's going to be an extra mechanism, but what do you think about that?
every day there's another smokescreen put up. In the end, someone's got to be held accountable, and the questions still remain over why no one is being held accountable for it. And Queenslanders won't cop that each day there's some sort of nuance as to why no one will be held accountable. Good governments hold people accountable, and Queenslanders don't need an investigation to work out that Mark Bailey shouldn't be a minister, and questions still remain over what the Premier knew and why she refused to tell people about that. And every time we ask questions about this, the Premier won't take the next step and explain what the consequences for the behaviour will be. And announcing another investigation and another nuance doesn't change the fact that the Premier wasn't open and honest with Queenslanders, and there's no consequence for Mark Bailey's bad behaviour. And all we've seen today is another smokescreen. Someone has got to be held accountable, and someone has to be open and honest. And leadership would be calling time on Mark Bailey's multitude of failures, and leadership would be the Premier admitting that she was part of the cover-up and explaining what the consequences are to respect taxpayers' money and make sure that somebody is held accountable, not another smokescreen as to why people won't answer questions.
What kind of things do you think would make the review more independent?
Well, Queenslanders don't need a review to work out that someone should be held accountable for deliberately covering up $2.4 billion. The Minister has had far too many second chances, and the Premier, by her own admission, knew about it and hid it from Queenslanders. So all another review and another nuance of that review will do is buy more time and create another smokescreen instead of holding people accountable. And Queenslanders are losing faith in the government's honesty. They can no longer trust the government, and they just want consequences for bad behaviour. And you don't get any more bad behaviour than deliberately covering up $2.4 billion in cost overruns. That could have built a brand new hospital for a state in the middle of a health crisis. And instead, the government did all it can to keep that from Queenslanders. And now, instead of facing the music, instead of ensuring that somebody is held accountable, the Premier finds a new way to put a new twist on the same investigation, which is nothing but a smokescreen to keep a minister who shouldn't be in office and a Premier from answering questions about the fact that she knew about a $2.4 billion blowout and wasn't willing to share it with Queenslanders.
You tried to use estimates to get some answers from the Premier. You asked multiple questions about the timing of things. What did you make of the responses and given where we are right now?
Rather than point out the obvious about what a disaster the way estimates was run, let me commit to you that I intend to fix the estimates process in Queensland. I intend to let the sun shine in. And the days of ministers hiding behind committee chairs who are partisan and deliberately stopping questions being asked, the days of Dorothy Dix's going forever will be over. And with that will come a better standard of ministerial accountability and a better standard of government. Because what we saw transpire was a dead set disgrace. And for a $2.4 billion cover-up to not be questioned in the way that it should have been should make every taxpayer wondering what on earth government in this state is doing at the moment. And we intend to fix that process.
Did you feel like she answered your questions?
Not at all. And you only have to look at the transcript to see the protection racket that was run by the chair. My advice to the Premier would be stop hiding behind fake investigations, stop looking for smoke screens, hold a minister accountable who continues to do this. He's got form, and the Premier owes the state an apology as to why she was part of a $2.4 billion cover-up.
Just on the Olympics, we know that there was a worry that Brisbane isn't well known enough globally to warrant an everlasting, legacy games. Do you think the Matildas win at the weekend will help sort of cement Brisbane as that sporting destination?
It was pretty special. And the Olympics does provide a once-in-a-generation opportunity to show the world how great Queensland is. But I tell you what, a group of Australian footballers have done a pretty good job at it too. And the vast majority of them are from the Sunshine State, which makes it particularly sweet.
And Chris Minns reckons that New South Wales should get a public holiday if they win the World Cup. Do you reckon that's a good idea for Queensland?
Well, that's a matter for Mr. Minns, and I've seen the Prime Minister commenting on it as well. I'm proud of the performance of the Matildas. It was pretty special. As for those things, well, the Prime Minister's made some comments, and that's a matter for him. Righto, thanks guys.
Holiday.